The hope chest sat unfinished in Carter's workshop, its hand-carved lilies frozen in mid-bloom, just like the relationship with the stepdaughter he'd raised as his own. 15 years of sawdust and sacrifice had built a family Carter thought was solid as oak. But as he traced his calloused finger over Lily's college acceptance letter, the formal mark that replaced Dad cut deeper than any chisel ever could. The letter trembled in his weathered hands, hands that had steadied her bicycle, built her bedroom furniture, and applauded at every school concert. These same hands had taught her to sand with the grain, to respect the wood's natural character. Now they seemed suddenly foreign to her. What happens when the family you've crafted with love decides you were only ever the blueprint, not the foundation? Carter was about to discover whether the things he'd built with his hands might outlast what he'd built with his heart. Carter Davis stood back from the desk, running his palm over the smooth oak surface one final time. 3 coats of finish, each hand rubbed until it gleamed like honey in the late evening light streaming through his workshop windows. He'd spent every evening for 2 weeks on this surprise for Lily's dorm room, working well past midnight after long days at job sites. "Perfect," he murmured, tracing the carved inscription on the underside of the desktop. "Built with love to last a lifetime. Dad." The smell of sawdust and varnish filled his nostrils, familiar as his own heartbeat after 30 years as a carpenter. This wasn't just furniture. It was the culmination of everything he'd built since marrying Sarah and becoming 5-year-old Lily's father. Not stepfather. He'd never used that word. Just Dad. Carter checked his watch. Nearly 7. Sarah would have dinner waiting. He'd clean up later. Right now, he wanted to tell his girls about the desk, see Lily's face when she realized he'd created something special for her college journey. He smiled, remembering how she'd pored over those college brochures, her acceptance letter proudly displayed on the refrigerator. His little girl was growing up, but she'd take a piece of home with her. The kitchen was warm with the smell of lasagna when he entered. Sarah glanced up from setting the table, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "You're just in time," she said, gesturing toward the dining room they rarely used. Lily wanted to discuss some college options. Lily sat scrolling through her phone, barely looking up as Carter entered. "Hey," she said flatly, thumbs still tapping the screen. "Big night for discussion, huh?" Carter leaned down to kiss the top of her head, but she shifted slightly, making him miss. He pretended not to notice. "I've got some exciting news about—" "Mom and I were looking at housing options," Lily interrupted, finally setting down her phone. "The standard dorms are really basic, but there's this apartment-style housing that would be so much better." She slid a glossy brochure across the table. "It's only $600 more per semester." Carter frowned slightly as he studied the prices. "That's almost $3,000 extra each year, Lily. We talked about this. The regular dorms are perfectly fine for freshman year. Most students aren't living in moldy shoeboxes with community bathrooms," Lily cut in, rolling her eyes. "Chelsea's parents already got her the apartment style. It has a kitchenette and everything." Carter looked to Sarah, expecting support for their agreed-upon budget, but she was studying her wineglass. "Well," she said carefully, "we could at least consider it. It's not that much more in the grand scheme." "The grand scheme includes several other expenses we've already stretched for," Carter reminded her gently. "But that's not what I wanted to talk about. I've been working on a surprise, a custom desk for your dorm room, Lily. Just finished it tonight." Lily glanced up, then immediately back at her phone as it buzzed. "We could just buy one from Wayfair, like normal people," she said, fingers flying over the screen as she responded to a text. "Anyway, about the housing, I already told Chelsea we'd probably be roommates." The conversation shifted to meal plans, leaving Carter's desk announcement hanging in the air. He ate quietly, watching his daughter and wondering when exactly her eyes had started glossing over when he spoke. Later, as he loaded the dishwasher, he noticed an unfamiliar phone charger plugged into the kitchen outlet. "Whose charger is this?" he asked, holding it up. "Mine," said Lily quickly. "A friend's," said Sarah simultaneously. Carter's brow furrowed as they exchanged a quick glance. "I thought yours was the blue one," he said to Lily. "I have multiple chargers, Dad," she sighed, the word Dad somehow sounding different than it used to. "It's not exactly a mystery." That night, unable to sleep, Carter heard Lily's hushed voice through her bedroom door as he passed to get water. He paused, not intending to eavesdrop until he heard clearly, "I can't wait to see you too, Dad. I'll try to come this weekend." The glass nearly slipped from Carter's hand. Dad? He'd been Dad to Lily since she was 5 years old. She had no memories of her biological father, who disappeared before she could walk and never paid $1 in child support. Who was she calling Dad at midnight? When he mentioned the call to Sarah the next morning, her reaction was too casual. "She's just excited about college." "Stop overanalyzing everything, Carter," she said, avoiding his eyes as she hurried to get ready for work. The dismissal felt practiced, as though she'd been preparing for this conversation. Later that week, Carter met his old friend Miguel for coffee at the hardware store where they'd first met decades ago. The owner, Frank, waved as they settled at the small table by the window. "How's the family?" Miguel asked, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Lily must be excited about college." Carter hesitated. "Something's different lately. Lily's distant, secretive. Last night I heard her on the phone calling someone else Dad." Miguel's expression shifted. "Man, I wasn't going to mention it, but I saw Lily last week at that new restaurant downtown, the expensive one. She was with some older guy I didn't recognize. They seemed familiar with each other." Carter felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "You sure it was her?" "Positive." I waved, but she pretended not to see me. Miguel leaned forward. "Look, Carter, I've known you 15 years. You're more that girl's father than anyone with matching DNA could ever be." The knot in Carter's stomach tightened. "Sarah's been acting strange too. Defensive." Frank approached with a coffee refill. "Heard you mention Sarah. Saw her last week in Riverdale, having lunch with some guy. Thought it was odd, since you were working that big job across town." He shrugged apologetically. "Figured it was a work thing." Carter nodded, saying nothing as the pieces began fitting together in his mind. That evening, he opened Lily's desk drawer while putting away laundry and found what he'd been dreading: a Father's Day card addressed to Dad, my real dad, with an unfamiliar name. Inside was a photo of Lily with a man who looked vaguely like her around the eyes. The final confirmation came when he checked their joint account and found a $500 withdrawal on the very day he'd worked overtime specifically to add to Lily's college fund. The withdrawal had been made in Riverdale, where Sarah had been seen with the mystery man. Carter waited until Sunday evening when the three of them were home together. He placed the card, bank statement, and phone charger on the coffee table. "I think we need to talk," he said quietly. "Something's going on, and I'd like to understand." Lily immediately went defensive. "You went through my stuff. That's a total invasion of privacy." "Lily." Carter kept his voice steady. "You've been calling someone else Dad while accepting everything I provide. I just want honesty." "You chose to marry Mom," Lily snapped. "Nobody asked you to play Dad. That was your decision." Carter felt each word like a physical blow, but maintained his composure. "And the money withdrawn from our account?" he asked, looking at Sarah. Sarah stepped between them. I authorized those withdrawals. Don't you trust me? Her voice had the practiced smoothness of someone who'd become comfortable with deception. I'd like to, Sarah, but right now, that's getting difficult. Carter stood, gathering the evidence from the table. We're having a college send-off gathering next weekend. Maybe by then we can all be honest with each other. As he walked away, he heard Sarah say to Lily, "Don't worry, he's overreacting. It'll blow over." Carter headed to his workshop, the one place that still made sense. There, surrounded by the projects he'd built with his hands, he began to wonder if his family had always been as solid as he'd believed. Every piece of wood has its own story. Carter had taught Lily this when she was 7, guiding her small finger along the growth rings of an oak plank. "See how the grain never lies," he'd explained. "These lines tell you everything about the tree's life, the good years, the drought years, the damage that healed." Now, standing in his workshop, Carter read a different kind of pattern emerging in his family, one he should have noticed forming long before it became so clear. The Father's Day card still lay on his workbench where he'd placed it last night. To Dad, my real dad, stared back at him, the word real underlined twice in Lily's handwriting. Inside, a photograph showed Lily and a man with her same widow's peak and slightly upturned nose, Derek Reynolds, according to the signature. Carter recognized the name from Sarah's old papers, though she rarely mentioned him. He was the biological father who'd vanished from Lily's life before her first birthday. Carter methodically began collecting the evidence, carpenter's precision applied to this unwanted new project. He created a folder labeled Family Changes and added the card along with printouts of the bank statements showing withdrawals on days when both Sarah and Lily had claimed to be elsewhere. The amounts were significant, $200 here, $500 there, all from the account meant for family expenses and Lily's education. He found more disturbing patterns when he checked Lily's social media accounts, which she'd apparently forgotten were still connected to his email. Dozens of photos with the same man from the card, dating back nearly 6 months. In one caption, she referred to making up for lost time with my dad. There were expensive restaurants, shopping bags from luxury stores, and not a single mention of Carter. The next day, Carter went to the bank and requested a complete transaction history. The teller's expression softened with recognition. "Mr. Davis, I wasn't sure if you were aware," she said quietly, "but there have been several large ATM withdrawals from this account in Riverdale over the past few months." "I'm becoming aware," Carter replied, his voice steady despite the churning in his stomach. "Can you tell me how much in total?" The amount, nearly $7,000, made him grip the counter. That was money he'd worked overtime to save, skipping lunches and taking extra jobs. Money for Lily's future. On his way home, Carter stopped by Miguel's repair shop. His friend wiped greasy hands on a rag as Carter spread out the evidence on a workbench. "I'm not crazy, am I?" Carter asked, gesturing to the pile. Miguel examined the documents, his expression darkening. "No, brother, you're not crazy. This is systematic." He pointed to the bank statements. "These withdrawals happen every 2 weeks. Like clockwork." "What would you do?" Carter asked, the rare admission of uncertainty from a man who typically solved problems without hesitation. Miguel leaned against the workbench. "I'd get legal advice before the college fund disappears too. My cousin Jennifer's a divorce attorney. She's good, discreet." Carter winced at the word divorce. "I don't know if it's there yet." "Maybe not," Miguel said gently. "But Carter, I've known you 15 years. You're more that girl's father than anyone with matching DNA could ever be. Don't let them convince you otherwise." That evening, Carter tried one more time for an honest conversation. He waited until after dinner, when Sarah was loading the dishwasher and Lily was finishing homework at the kitchen table. "I'd like to talk about Derek Reynolds," Carter said calmly. The effect was immediate. Lily's pencil froze mid-equation. Sarah dropped a plate, which clattered but didn't break. "How do you know that name?" Sarah asked, not turning around. "That's not important," Carter replied. "What matters is that Lily's been seeing him for months, and from the bank withdrawals, it seems you have too." Lily slammed her textbook shut. "You don't get to decide who I can see. He's my real father." "Real?" Carter repeated quietly. "I was real when I taught you to ride a bike. I was real when I built your first bookshelf. I was real during every parent-teacher conference, every doctor's appointment, every nightmare and school play for the last 15 years. That doesn't make you my father," Lily shot back. "You just married my mom. That was your choice." Sarah finally turned from the sink. "Carter, you're overreacting. Lily's just connecting with her biological father. It's natural for her to be curious." "Curious doesn't explain the withdrawals from our account, Sarah, or why you've been meeting him too." Sarah's face flushed. "I authorized those withdrawals." "Don't you trust me?" "I did," Carter said simply. "Completely." "Look," Sarah said, her voice taking on the patronizing tone that had become familiar lately. "We're all stressed about college preparations. The send-off party is this weekend. Can we just get through that without drama?" Carter looked between them, his wife and the daughter he'd raised, suddenly feeling like a stranger in his own home. "Sure," he said finally. "We'll get through the party." As he left the kitchen, he heard Lily whisper, "He'll get over it, right?" "Of course," Sarah replied. "He always does." That night, Carter sat alone in his workshop until dawn, surrounded by projects he'd built for a family that now felt like an illusion. The hope chest for Lily's graduation gift sat half-finished on his workbench. He'd planned to fill it with mementos of their life together, photos, her first woodworking project, small treasures from family vacations. Now he wondered if those memories meant anything to her at all. He ran his hand over the unfinished wood, feeling the grain that never lied. Unlike people, wood was honest about its flaws and strengths. It never pretended to be something it wasn't. By morning, Carter had made his decision. He would finish the hope chest for the party, one last gift built with love. After that, whatever happened would depend on whether his family could be as honest as the wood he'd shaped his life around. Saturday arrived with the perfection of early autumn, crisp air, golden light, leaves just beginning to suggest their eventual transformation. Carter had spent every evening that week in his workshop, finishing Lily's hope chest with the same care he'd always invested in family projects. Each dovetail joint, each hand-carved lily on the lid, represented years of love that couldn't be undone, regardless of what happened next. The backyard was decorated with strings of lights Sarah had asked Carter to hang. Friends and neighbors arrived bearing graduation cards and college necessities. Carter greeted them with practiced smiles, accepting congratulations for Lily's scholarship and academic achievements. No one seemed to notice the strain behind his eyes or the careful distance between him and Sarah. The hope chest sat covered on a table near the gifts, waiting for the moment Carter had planned, a public declaration of his enduring love for the daughter who'd recently begun erasing him from her life. Miguel arrived late, clasping Carter's shoulder with silent support. "Hanging in there?" he asked quietly. "Getting through it," Carter replied, watching Lily across the yard as she texted rapidly on her phone, barely engaging with the guests who'd come to celebrate her. When it was time for gifts, Sarah gestured for Carter to go first. He'd always been the emotional cornerstone of family celebrations, the one who made thoughtful speeches that brought meaning to milestones. Carter removed the cloth covering the hope chest, revealing the gleaming oak with its intricate carvings. A collective murmur of appreciation rose from the gathering. "Lily," he began, his voice steady despite the knot in his throat. "I started building this when you got your first college acceptance letter. I wanted you to have something that would hold your memories, past and future." He ran his hand over the carved lilies. "I've tried to give you roots and wings. The roots are here in this chest, in everything we've shared. The wings are yours to spread at college." He opened the lid, revealing the items he'd carefully placed inside: photos from family vacations, the small jewelry box he'd helped her build in his workshop when she was 10, ticket stubs from her first concert where he'd chaperoned, embarrassing her by wearing earplugs. "I've been building this family with love for 15 years, he said, looking directly at Lily. "This chest is meant to remind you that no matter where you go, you always have a home and a father who loves you." The silence that followed lasted several heartbeats too long. Lily stared at the chest, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was ice. "Thanks, Mark, but my real dad is getting me a laptop for college. I don't need old junk." The air seemed to crystallize. Carter felt Miguel tense beside him. Several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. The name Mark, formal, distant, erasing years of Dad, hung in the space between them. Carter looked to Sarah, standing beside their daughter. Her eyes dropped to the ground. She said nothing to defend the man who'd been her partner for 15 years. "Lily's just stressed about college," Sarah finally said to the shocked guests. "Let's have cake." The party dissolved into awkward conversations and early departures. Carter moved through it like a man underwater, shaking hands and accepting well wishes with automatic responses. Inside, something fundamental had broken, not just with Lily, but with the family he thought he'd built. Later, putting away photo albums guests had looked through, Carter found an envelope that had fallen behind the bookshelf. Inside were more photos. Sarah with Derek Reynolds at what appeared to be a hotel restaurant, their posture intimately familiar. The date stamp showed it was taken 3 months ago. Carter sat heavily on the couch, the photos confirming what he'd suspected, but hadn't wanted to believe. Sarah's betrayal wasn't just about allowing Lily to connect with her biological father. It was deeper, more personal. In his workshop that night, Carter stood before the mirror he kept for checking furniture proportions. The face that looked back was older than he remembered, lines carved deeper by recent revelations. "No more," he said aloud, the words forming a boundary he hadn't known he needed until now. The next morning, he began researching divorce attorneys. Miguel's cousin Jennifer had excellent reviews and a straightforward approach according to her website. Carter made an appointment for Monday, then began organizing financial documents and photographs of furniture he'd built for the home. When Sarah found him in the home office, surrounded by papers, her casual demeanor faltered. "What are you doing?" she asked, eyeing the stacks of documents. "I've scheduled an appointment with a divorce attorney," Carter replied, without looking up. "The college fund will be discussed there." Sarah's composure cracked. "A divorce attorney? Carter, that's extreme. So Lily's spending time with her biological father. That doesn't mean—" "I found the photos, Sarah." He finally met her eyes. "You and Derek at the Riverdale Hotel." Sarah's face drained of color. "I can explain. I'm sure you can," Carter interrupted gently. "You've been explaining things away for months now. Those tactics worked for 15 years. They won't work anymore." "What about Lily's college fund?" Panic edged into Sarah's voice. "As I said, We'll discuss that with the attorneys. Carter turned back to his documents. I've contributed to that fund with every overtime hour for years. Its future will depend on honesty, something in short supply around here lately. That night, Carter moved his essentials to the guest bedroom. As he made the unfamiliar bed, he could hear Sarah and Lily in heated discussion down the hall, their voices dropping whenever they approached his name. In the quiet of the room that was no longer his, Carter made a list of people and resources he'd need in the coming weeks. Miguel, Jennifer the attorney, Frank from the hardware store who might know of apartments, his banking information, the documentation of his business assets. For the first time since the betrayal began revealing itself, Carter felt a glimmer of clarity. The family he thought he'd built might be splintered beyond repair, but he wasn't broken. Like the wood he'd shaped for decades, he could still be transformed into something strong, if different from what he'd envisioned. Cut once, measure twice, Carter had always taught Lily when they worked together in his shop. Now, sitting across from Jennifer Keller in her sunlit office, he recognized the wisdom of his own advice applied to this unwanted new project, rebuilding a life after betrayal. You've done an excellent job documenting everything, Jennifer said, reviewing the folder of financial records, photographs, and timeline Carter had meticulously prepared. Her efficiency reminded him of a master craftswoman assessing materials before beginning work. Most clients come in with emotion but no evidence. You've brought both. I'm still having trouble believing it's come to this, Carter admitted. 15 years. Jennifer nodded, her expression compassionate but practical. Blended families face unique challenges, especially when biological parents re-enter the picture. But what concerns me most is the financial aspect. She tapped the bank statements. These systematic withdrawals suggest planning, not impulse. What about Lily's college fund? Carter asked. I've been contributing since she was 5. It's in a separate account, but Sarah's name is on it too. Jennifer pulled up the documents Carter had emailed earlier. Because you've documented your specific contributions and maintained separate accounting, we have a strong case for protecting those funds. Have you considered a conditional trust? What would that involve? You'd maintain control of the funds while establishing specific requirements for disbursement, educational expenses only, minimum GPA requirements, perhaps behavioral conditions. Jennifer leaned forward. It protects your investment in Lily's future while establishing clear boundaries. For the first time in weeks, Carter felt a sense of relief. That sounds exactly right. I want consequences, not revenge. There's a difference. After the appointment, Carter drove to his bank, where he arranged for separate accounts and credit cards. The personal banker, who'd known Carter for years, handled the transition discreetly. I've also prepared documents regarding your safe deposit box, she said, sliding papers across the desk. You're the only signatory on that, correct? Carter had forgotten about the small box he'd rented years ago to store the deed to his workshop property and some family heirlooms. Yes, that's correct. Good. You might consider storing additional important documents there during this transition. Next, Carter met with a real estate agent recommended by Jennifer. They reviewed housing options that would accommodate both living space and a small workshop. This property might interest you, the agent said, showing photos of a modest house with a detached garage. The previous owner was also a woodworker. The garage is already set up with proper electrical and ventilation. Looking at the images, Carter felt a genuine smile form for the first time in weeks. The space was smaller than his current workshop, but thoughtfully designed. It represented something he hadn't considered yet, a fresh start. I'd like to see it, he said. That evening, Carter inventoried his tools and materials, differentiating business assets from household items. His careful records of workshop expenses over the years, initially kept for tax purposes, now served as evidence that his carpentry business remained separate from joint marital assets. Sarah appeared in the workshop doorway as he photographed a custom dining table he'd built for their home 5 years ago. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice tight. "Getting organized," Carter replied calmly. "The divorce attorney recommended it." "You're really going through with this?" Sarah's composure slipped. "After one misunderstanding?" Carter set down his camera. "Is that what you call 15 years of building a life together, Sarah? A misunderstanding?" "People reconnect with ex-partners all the time. It doesn't have to mean the affair is just one piece," Carter interrupted gently. "You've been withdrawing money without discussion, lying about your whereabouts, and encouraging Lily to reject the only father she's known since she was 5. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a pattern of choices." Sarah's expression hardened. "You always have to be so righteous, don't you? So perfect and wounded. Maybe if you weren't so rigid with money, Lily wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere." "Is that the story you're telling yourself?" Carter asked, genuinely curious. "That Lily sought out Derek because I'm rigid with money? Not because you've been facilitating it for months?" Sarah fell silent, then tried another approach. "What about Lily's college fund? You wouldn't punish her for reconnecting with her biological father, would you?" "The college fund is being restructured into a conditional trust," Carter explained. "The money will still be available for legitimate educational expenses, provided certain requirements are met." "Requirements?" Sarah's voice rose. "What gives you the right to set conditions? You're not even her real father." The words hung in the workshop air, confirming everything Carter had come to realize. He turned back to his inventory, his voice calm but final. "That's for the courts to decide now, Sarah. Please close the door on your way out." After she left, Carter sat on his workbench, surrounded by the tools and projects that had always provided clarity when life grew complicated. The parallel suddenly struck him. How he'd always been able to see potential in raw materials, to transform flawed wood into something beautiful and functional. Now he needed to apply that same vision to his own life. The family structure he'd built had collapsed, but the core materials, his integrity, craftsmanship, community connections, remained strong. Miguel stopped by later with takeout food, correctly guessing Carter might not be eating properly. They sat on the workshop stools, talking through practical next steps. "Jennifer says the initial divorce filing should happen this week," Carter explained between bites. "She's preparing everything for the college fund trust conversion, too." "How are you holding up?" Miguel asked, his concern evident. "Better than I expected," Carter admitted. "There's something clarifying about finally seeing the truth, even when it hurts." "The community's behind you," Miguel assured him. "Frank's been telling customers you might be looking for new projects to keep busy. You've got 3 commissions waiting whenever you're ready." For the first time, Carter could envision a path forward, different from what he'd planned, but potentially solid. He had his craftsmanship, his reputation, his true friends. The home he'd thought would last a lifetime might be lost, but he could build again. He'd always been good at building. When Miguel left, Carter returned to the hope chest Lily had rejected. He carefully removed the family mementos he'd placed inside, replacing them with the documentation he'd gathered of his contributions to their family life. Whatever happened next, the record would be clear. Carter closed the lid, running his hand over the carved lilies one last time. "Measure twice," he murmured to himself. "Cut once." The conference room at Jennifer Keller's law office held a polished oak table that Carter couldn't help but admire despite the circumstances. Quarter-sawn oak, expertly joined. the kind of craftsmanship that spoke of permanence and tradition. Ironic, given they were gathered to dismantle a 15-year marriage. Carter sat with Jennifer on one side, while Sarah and her attorney, a sharp-featured man named Prescott, occupied the other. The preliminary divorce hearing was scheduled for the following week, but today's meeting focused on immediate financial arrangements, including the college fund. "My client has prepared a proposal regarding the joint assets," Jennifer began, sliding folders across the table. "As you'll see, Mr. Davis has meticulously documented his separate business assets while suggesting an equitable division of household items." Prescott flipped through the pages with narrowed eyes. "And the college fund for Lily, that's our primary concern today." Jennifer nodded to Carter, who cleared his throat. "I've established a conditional trust for Lily's education," he explained. "The funds will be available for tuition, books, and housing, provided certain requirements are met." "Requirements?" Sarah interjected. "What kind of requirements?" "Standard educational conditions," Jennifer clarified. "Maintaining a minimum GPA, enrollment verification, and direct payment to the institution rather than disbursement to Lily personally." "This is controlling and punitive," Prescott argued. "Mr. Davis is using financial leverage to punish Lily for reconnecting with her biological father." "On the contrary," Jennifer countered, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. Davis has fully funded this account throughout Lily's life. The trust simply ensures the money serves its intended purpose: education. Given recent unauthorized withdrawals from joint accounts, this structure protects everyone's interests." Carter watched Sarah's face as Jennifer slid across bank statements documenting the systematic withdrawals. Her expression shifted from indignation to uncertainty as she realized the evidence was comprehensive. "Furthermore," Jennifer continued, "should this matter go before a judge, we're prepared to present documentation regarding Miss Reynolds' ongoing relationship with Derek Reynolds, including hotel receipts and photographs. We'd prefer to keep such matters private, but will do whatever necessary to protect Mr. Davis's financial contributions to Lily's education." The meeting concluded with Sarah and Prescott requesting time to review the proposal. As they gathered their materials, Carter noticed Sarah's hands trembling slightly, the first crack in her composure he'd seen since the confrontation began. In the parking lot, Jennifer offered a reassuring nod. "You're in a stronger position than most, Carter. The documentation makes all the difference." "What happens now?" he asked. "They'll likely counter with minor adjustments to save face, but the trust structure should remain intact. Your workshop and business are clearly separate from marital assets. The house sale proceeds will be the main negotiation point." She checked her watch. "I'll call when I hear from Prescott." Carter drove directly to see the small house with the detached workshop he'd found with the real estate agent. Walking through the spaces, he could envision a new life taking shape. Simpler, perhaps, but built on a more honest foundation. "The seller is motivated," the agent explained. "With your pre-approval, we could close quickly." "Let's make an offer," Carter decided. Something about taking this concrete step lightened the weight he'd been carrying. That evening, Carter began packing his personal belongings, starting with books and clothes that wouldn't be missed immediately. He worked methodically, labeling boxes with the same precision he applied to organizing tools. His phone rang as he sealed a box of winter clothes. Lily's name flashed on the screen, the first direct contact she'd initiated in weeks. "Hello?" Carter answered, trying to keep his voice neutral. "How could you do this to me?" Lily's words tumbled out, half angry, half tearful. "Mom says you're putting my college money in some kind of trust where I can't access it. Don't you love me anymore?" The manipulation was so transparent it almost made Carter wince. He could hear the coaching behind her words. "I've always loved you, Lily," he replied steadily. "But love without respect isn't healthy for either of us. The trust ensures your education is funded while protecting those resources. I need that money. You're just being controlling because you're jealous I'm spending time with my real dad." Carter closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the blow. The money will be there for legitimate educational expenses. That hasn't changed. "This is so unfair. I'm telling everyone how you abandoned us." "You're free to tell whatever story you choose," Carter said quietly. "But documents tell the truth, Lily. Bank statements, receipts, photographs, they don't lie about who's been providing for you all these years." The line went silent for a moment. When Lily spoke again, her voice had lost some of its rehearsed quality. "Mom says you're selling the house." "Yes. The proceeds will be divided according to the divorce agreement." "Where will you go?" Something in her question, a flicker of the child who'd once cared about him, almost broke Carter's resolve. "I've found a place. It has a workshop." Another silence. "So that's it. 15 years and you just leave?" "I didn't choose this path, Lily," Carter reminded her gently. "But I am choosing how I walk it, with dignity and honesty." After the call ended, Carter sat among the half-packed boxes, feeling strangely lighter. The conversation had been difficult but necessary, the first honest exchange they'd had in months. The following days brought a predictable escalation. Sarah told mutual friends that Carter was having a midlife crisis and abandoning his responsibilities. Some believed her, creating awkward encounters at the grocery store and coffee shop. One afternoon, Frank from the hardware store stopped by the workshop where Carter was finishing a commissioned piece. "Heard some talk around town," Frank said, arranging drill bits on the counter. "Sarah's been telling people you've lost your mind, walking out on them." Carter continued sanding, his strokes steady and even. "People will believe what they choose." "Not everybody," Frank countered. "Showed Martha those beautiful cabinets you built for our kitchen remodel. Told her a man who works with that kind of patience and integrity doesn't just lose his mind overnight. Your work speaks for you, Carter." The support was unexpected but welcome. Others followed, clients requesting new projects, neighbors offering to help with moving, Miguel and his wife inviting Carter for regular Sunday dinners. 3 weeks after filing for divorce, Carter received word that his offer on the house with the workshop had been accepted. The timing aligned perfectly with the court date for finalizing the divorce and asset division. That evening, his phone rang with Sarah's number. "We need to talk about the trust," she said without preamble. "Lily's furious. She was counting on having direct access to those funds." "For educational expenses, she will," Carter replied. "The trust administrator will pay the school directly." "That's not good enough. She needs flexibility." Carter recognized the desperation in Sarah's voice. "The flexibility was there before the deception, Sarah. Actions have consequences." "She'll refuse to attend college at all if you do this," Sarah threatened. "Is that what you want?" "What I want stopped mattering to either of you months ago," Carter observed. "But let me be clear. The trust stands. If Lily chooses not to attend college because she can't access cash meant for education, that's her decision." After hanging up, Carter contemplated the almost completed cabinet he'd been building for a new client. The piece was simpler than his usual work. Clean lines, minimal ornamentation, yet somehow more honest, like the life he was rebuilding. The day before the final divorce hearing, Carter visited the house one last time to collect remaining workshop items. Sarah was at work, but he found Lily unexpectedly home, sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by college brochures. They regarded each other awkwardly, the first time they'd been alone together since the confrontation. "I'm just getting the last of my tools," Carter explained. Lily nodded, looking down at the brochures. "So you're really moving?" "Tomorrow after the hearing." Carter hesitated, then added, "The trust paperwork will be finalized then, too. You'll receive information about how to access funds for tuition and housing." "What if I decide not to go to college?" Her question sounded more curious than defiant. "That would be your choice," Carter replied. "The funds will remain in trust until you're 25. After that, whatever remains becomes yours regardless." Something shifted in Lily's expression, a realization that her attempts at leverage had failed. "Mom says you're being controlling." "Your mother is entitled to her opinion." Lily looked up finally, meeting his eyes. "And what if I wanted to go to community college first? Would the trust cover that?" The question surprised him. It was the first practical, non-confrontational question she'd asked in months. "Yes, of course. Any accredited institution." She nodded again, returning to the brochures. Carter continued to his workshop, wondering about the small crack that had appeared in her defensive armor. The divorce was finalized the next day, with terms largely as Jennifer had proposed. The house would be sold, with proceeds divided equally. Carter's business remained separate property. The college fund was formally converted to a trust with the conditions Carter had specified. As they left the courthouse, Sarah attempted one final manipulation. "I hope you're satisfied," she said bitterly. "You've torn apart our family over one mistake." Carter regarded her calmly. "The family was already torn apart, Sarah. I just finally noticed the seams." He nodded politely to her attorney. "Good day." That afternoon, Carter moved the last of his belongings to the new house. The detached workshop, though smaller than his previous space, had excellent natural light and felt immediately right. He carefully arranged his tools, honoring the system he'd developed over decades. That evening, alone in the unfamiliar house, with boxes still unpacked, Carter felt neither victory nor defeat, only a quiet certainty that he'd done what was necessary. He'd cut cleanly, following the grain of truth rather than forcing a shape that no longer fit. He picked up his phone and blocked Sarah's number, then limited Lily's to text only. Some boundaries needed to be digital as well as emotional. As he hung the first framed photograph in his new living room, not a family portrait, but an image of a table he'd crafted for a community center, Carter realized he was building something new. Not what he'd planned, not what he'd worked toward for 15 years, but perhaps something that would stand stronger for being built on honesty. 6 months passed, with the rhythm of seasons changing. Carter established new routines in his home, finding unexpected peace in smaller spaces, filled only with items he'd chosen. The workshop hummed with activity as word spread about his craftsmanship, bringing more commissions than he could accept. Communication from Sarah had ceased entirely after several unanswered attempts to renegotiate the trust. Lily occasionally sent brief, practical texts about administrative details for college, questions about the trust procedure, or document requirements. Carter answered each with the same steady clarity he'd always brought to teaching her about tools. Early autumn arrived with crisp air that reminded Carter of the college send-off party a year earlier. The public rejection that had crystallized his understanding of where he stood with his family. The memory no longer carried the sharp pain of fresh betrayal, though the scar remained. On a Saturday morning, as Carter measured wood for a custom bookcase, his phone chimed with an unfamiliar number. Wiping sawdust from his hands, he answered cautiously. "Carter Davis speaking." "Carter." Sarah's voice sounded different, strained and smaller somehow. We need to talk." He considered hanging up, but something in her tone gave him pause. "I thought we'd said everything necessary through the attorneys." "Please," she said, the word uncharacteristically humble. "It's important. Can we meet somewhere? Lily needs to be there too." Carter's instinct for self-protection battled with curiosity. "What's this about, Sarah? We can't discuss it over the phone." A pause. "Please, Carter. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't crucial." Against his better judgment, Carter agreed to meet them at a coffee shop halfway between their homes. As he drove there the following day, he reminded himself to maintain boundaries, regardless of whatever new manipulation might be forthcoming. The coffee shop was busy with Sunday afternoon customers. Carter spotted Sarah and Lily at a corner table, both looking noticeably different than when he'd last seen them. Sarah appeared older somehow, makeup failing to conceal dark circles beneath her eyes. Lily had lost weight, her college sweatshirt hanging loosely on her frame. "Thank you for coming," Sarah said as he sat down, leaving an empty chair between them. Carter nodded, waiting. He noticed Lily wouldn't meet his eyes. "We need your help," Sarah began, her voice low. "Things with Derek have become complicated." "Complicated how?" Carter kept his tone neutral. Sarah glanced around nervously before continuing. "After the divorce, we reconnected more fully. He moved in with us 3 months ago. That's when everything changed." "He's not who we thought," Lily interjected suddenly, her voice cracking. "He's not who he pretended to be." "I'm going to need more specifics," Carter said, his carpenter's precision refusing vague outlines. Sarah took a deep breath. "He's been taking money, a lot of money. When it ran out, he became," she hesitated, "aggressive." "Threatening." "Threatening how?" Carter's protective instinct stirred despite himself. "He found out about the insurance settlement from my mother's estate," Sarah explained. "When I wouldn't give him access, he threatened to release some compromising information." "He's blackmailing you," Carter translated flatly. Sarah nodded, eyes down. "About the affair." "It started before—" She paused, glancing at Lily. "Before we even told Lily he was back in contact. There are emails, photos. If they became public, I could lose my job." Carter absorbed this information silently, pieces clicking into place. He turned to Lily, who still wouldn't meet his gaze. "And your role in all this?" Lily's shoulders hunched forward. When she finally looked up, tears streaked her face. "I lied to you," she whispered, "about everything." "Lily," Sarah warned. "No, Mom. He deserves the truth." Lily wiped her eyes. "Derek threatened you, Carter. He said if I didn't push you away, make you leave, he'd—" Her voice broke. "He'd hurt you. Said he had friends who could make it look like an accident at your workshop." Carter felt as though the floor had shifted beneath him. "You were trying to protect me by rejecting me?" Lily nodded miserably. "I thought if you hated me, if you left on your own, you'd be safe. I never thought Mom would actually—" She trailed off, glancing accusingly at Sarah. "The affair was real," Sarah admitted. "But Lily's rejection of you wasn't. Derek manipulated her, convinced her you were in danger." Carter leaned back, processing this revelation. The carpenter in him recognized how this new information changed the grain of the story, not erasing the betrayal, but revealing complexities within it. "Why tell me this now?" he asked finally. "He's demanding the trust fund," Sarah explained. "Says if we don't get him that money, he'll release everything and escalate his threats. Against me? Against all of us." Sarah's voice trembled. "He has a record, Carter. Assault charges we didn't know about. I think he's desperate enough to follow through." Carter studied them both, looking for signs of manipulation. What he saw instead was genuine fear, the same tightness around the eyes he'd noticed in clients facing bankruptcy or illness. "Have you gone to the police?" he asked. "He said he has friends on the force," Lily explained. "I don't know if it's true, but we're scared to find out." Carter nodded slowly, thinking. The trust fund isn't accessible as cash. It's structured specifically to prevent exactly this kind of situation. "We know," Sarah said. "That's why we need your help. You designed it that way." "What exactly are you asking for?" Sarah and Lily exchanged glances. "We don't know," Sarah admitted. "Protection? Advice?" You always knew what to do in a crisis. The irony wasn't lost on Carter, being asked for help by the same people who had systematically pushed him away. Yet beneath his caution, another feeling stirred, the certainty that no one deserved to live under threats, regardless of past actions. "I need time to think," he said finally, standing. "And I need proof, texts, emails, recordings, anything documenting these threats." "We have some," Lily said quickly. "I'll forward them to you." Carter nodded. "Do that. And don't agree to meet him alone, either of you. Stay with friends if possible." He paused. "I'll be in touch within 48 hours. As he walked to his truck, emotions warred within him. Anger at the manipulation he'd endured, concern for their safety, and beneath it all, a profound sadness for the family that might have been without Derek Reynolds's toxic influence. At home, Carter reviewed the evidence they sent, screenshots of threatening texts, a recording of Derek demanding money, photos of a bruise on Sarah's wrist. The material was disturbing and appeared genuine. He called Jennifer Keller that evening, explaining the situation and forwarding the evidence. "This changes things legally," she confirmed after reviewing the materials. "These are credible threats that warrant a restraining order at minimum. The blackmail adds another criminal dimension." "What about the trust fund?" Carter asked. "Could he access it through them somehow?" "No. The structure you established prevents withdrawal for non-educational purposes. It's ironclad." Jennifer paused. "But Carter, be careful. This man sounds dangerous. Don't get personally involved beyond legal channels." After hanging up, Carter sat in his workshop, running his hand along the grain of a walnut board he'd been saving for a special project. The wood's natural pattern revealed both beauty and flaws, much like the truth that had finally emerged about his family's betrayal. Lily hadn't rejected him out of entitlement or disdain, but out of misguided protection. Sarah's betrayal remained real, but existed alongside genuine fear. The family he'd thought he'd built hadn't been entirely an illusion, just fractured by forces he hadn't fully understood. The realization didn't erase the pain or justify the deception, but it added dimension to what had seemed flat and simple. Like wood grain revealing unexpected patterns when cut at different angles, the truth was more complex than he'd first understood. 2 days later, Carter met Sarah and Lily at Jennifer's office, where they gave formal statements about Derek's threats and blackmail attempts. Jennifer arranged for an emergency restraining order and connected them with a detective specializing in extortion cases. As they left the attorney's office, Lily hung back to walk beside Carter. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You didn't have to help us." "No, I didn't," Carter agreed. "But some choices aren't about obligation." "I never stopped thinking of you as my dad," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Even when I was saying the worst things, I just thought I was keeping you safe." Carter felt something shift in his chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but a crack in the wall he'd built for self-protection. "You were trying to protect me by pushing me away. I was trying to protect myself by letting you go." Seems we're both better at building walls than bridges." Lily's small, tentative smile reminded him of the child she'd been, the one who'd sat patiently beside him in the workshop, learning to sand with the grain. "What happens now?" she asked. Carter considered this carefully. "The legal process will handle Derek. As for us," he paused, measuring his words with the same precision he'd apply to an important cut. "Trust, like wood once split, can be repaired, but always shows the break. We start there, with that truth." Spring arrived in rural Oregon with a gentle persistence that reminded Carter of nature's patient approach to renewal. 6 months had passed since the truth about Derek Reynolds' manipulation and threats had emerged. The legal consequences had been swift and thorough. A restraining order, followed by criminal charges when Derek violated it, leading to his eventual imprisonment for blackmail and assault. Carter's life had settled into new patterns in his smaller home. The workshop hummed with activity most days, commissions booked months in advance. His reputation for quality craftsmanship had spread beyond the local community, bringing clients willing to wait for his meticulous work. Relations with Sarah remained formal and limited, necessary interactions regarding final property matters conducted through attorneys. Carter had neither sought nor offered forgiveness for the affair that had predated Derek's manipulations. Some breaches couldn't be mended, only accepted as permanent alterations to life's landscape. With Lily, however, a careful rebuilding had begun. It started with her enrollment in the local community college's business program, funded through the trust as Carter had promised. Their initial communications had been strictly practical, documentation requirements, tuition payment procedures, but gradually expanded to include brief updates about classes and occasional questions about managing her course load. On a Saturday afternoon, as Carter applied finish to a walnut dining table, his phone chimed with a text from Lily. "Could I stop by the workshop sometime? Need to talk about something." Carter considered the request, noting how different it felt from the entitled demands of the previous year. "I'm here until 6 today," he replied, "or Monday after 3. "On my way now, if that's okay," came the immediate response. Carter returned to his work, applying even strokes with the same steady patience he'd brought to rebuilding his life. An hour later, the crunch of tires on gravel announced Lily's arrival. She entered tentatively, glancing around the new workshop with obvious curiosity. "This is nice," she offered. "Different, but nice." Carter nodded, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Smaller, but the light is better." They stood in awkward silence until Lily gestured toward the walnut table. "That's beautiful. Commission?" "Anniversary gift from a husband to his wife, 40 years married." Carter ran his hand along the table's edge. They had their first date over a walnut table in his parents' home. Lily absorbed this, then took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about changing my major," she said. "The business classes are fine, but—" "But?" Carter prompted when she hesitated. "I was wondering if you'd teach me some basic carpentry." The words came out in a rush. "Nothing fancy, just fundamentals. The community college has a woodworking program, and I thought maybe—" Carter studied her face, searching for signs of manipulation and finding instead genuine uncertainty. "Why?" he asked simply. Lily's eyes dropped to the floor, then rose to meet his. "Because it matters to you," she said quietly, "and because I was wrong to dismiss it. All those years you tried to teach me, and I acted like it was boring or beneath me." "Woodworking isn't for everyone," Carter observed, his tone neutral. "I know, but I never really gave it a chance." She gestured to the table. "And seeing what you create, things that last, that mean something to people, it seems more real than marketing spreadsheets. Carter considered her request, weighing caution against possibility. The woodworking program at the college is excellent. Professor Winters is a master craftsman. I know, Lily acknowledged, but I'd rather learn the basics from you, if you're willing. The request hung between them, an olive branch, a step toward something neither could fully name. Carter moved to a workbench and picked up a piece of cherry wood he'd been saving. This requires commitment, he said finally, not just showing up when it's convenient or quitting when it gets difficult. I understand. Saturday mornings, then 9 to 11. He handed her the cherry wood. First project will be a simple box with dovetail joints. Bring this with you next week. Lily's smile contained equal parts relief and trepidation. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Carter replied, his expression softening slightly. You haven't seen how strict I am as a teacher. Their Saturday sessions began the following weekend. Carter discovered that teaching required a patience different from craftsmanship, particularly with a student who shared his stubborn precision. Lily struggled with the technical aspects, but never complained about redoing work that didn't meet standards. This is impossible, she muttered one morning, after her third attempt at a dovetail joint still showed gaps. Not impossible, Carter corrected, demonstrating the technique again. Demanding. There's a difference. Did I always give up this easily when I was younger? She asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Carter considered the question. You were more patient with yourself at 10 than you are at 19. Funny how that works? She picked up the saw again. Show me one more time. These moments, small, honest exchanges about craft and character, began building something neither had planned. Not the restoration of their previous relationship, but the careful construction of something new, with clearer understanding of its materials and limitations. 3 months into their Saturday sessions, Lily completed her first project, a cherry wood box with dovetail joints that, while imperfect, showed genuine care and improving skill. It's crooked, she said critically, examining the lid. Yes, Carter agreed, but it's solid. First projects aren't about perfection. They're about learning the process. After she left that day, Carter began working on a small project of his own. A keepsake box of walnut and maple, with restoration takes time, inscribed inside the lid. He worked on it during evenings, taking care with each detail. Community connections that had frayed during the divorce gradually reformed around Carter. Miguel and his wife hosted regular Sunday dinners. Former clients became friends who stopped by the workshop for coffee. Frank from the hardware store brought newcomers to town by to see the best craftsmen in 3 counties. One evening, as Carter closed the workshop, he noticed Sarah's car parked at the end of his driveway. She stood beside it, clearly hesitant to approach. Sarah, he acknowledged, neither welcoming nor dismissive. I'm sorry to come unannounced, she said. Lily told me about the woodworking lessons. It's the happiest I've seen her in years. Carter nodded, waiting. I wanted to thank you, Sarah continued, for helping with the restraining order, for maintaining the trust for her education, for, she gestured vaguely, for not turning your back when you had every right to. I didn't do it for you, Carter said simply. I know. Sarah looked down. I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I made the choices I did. She paused. I don't expect forgiveness, Carter. I just wanted you to know that Lily isn't the only one who recognizes what was lost. They stood in silence as the evening light faded. Carter considered her words, finding neither satisfaction nor resentment in them, only a quiet acknowledgment of truth. I hope you find what you're looking for, Sarah, he said finally. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't cruelty either. She nodded once before returning to her car. As she drove away, Carter realized the encounter had left him feeling not victorious or vindicated, but simply at peace. The way he felt when a piece of furniture was finally, completely finished. The following Saturday, he presented Lily with the keepsake box he'd made. She opened it slowly, running her fingers over the inscription inside the lid. "Restoration takes time," she read aloud. "Some things can't be fixed quickly," Carter explained. "But that doesn't mean they can't be rebuilt differently." Lily closed the box carefully. "Is that what we're doing? Rebuilding?" "I think so," Carter said. "One Saturday at a time." That evening, alone in his workshop, Carter began sketching plans for a new project, a small writing desk with clean, simple lines. Different from the ornate pieces he'd once favored, but perhaps more honest in its construction. Like the relationship he was carefully building with Lily, it wouldn't erase the past, but it offered something new, something that acknowledged both the breaks and the possibility of creating beauty around them. He ran his hand over the cherry wood he'd selected, feeling the grain that told its own story of growth, dormancy, and renewal. Some lessons, Carter reflected, could only be taught by time and truth, and some forms of restoration required taking everything apart before building something stronger. In my workshop now, 5 years since the family I thought I'd built splintered apart, I've come to understand that human relationships, like wood, reveal their true character under pressure. The grain that seemed straight and predictable can suddenly expose unexpected patterns when cut at different angles. The betrayal that once defined my days has weathered into something different, not erased, but transformed into a kind of wisdom, much like the character marks in aged wood that craftsmen prize rather than discard. I've learned that family bonds, once broken, leave permanent marks, yet these very breaks can become part of a new creation's strength and character when acknowledged honestly. Lily stops by the workshop most Sundays now. She's finishing her degree in architectural design, occasionally bringing sketches for me to review. Our conversations flow more easily, built on the foundation of those Saturday morning lessons where we both learned that patience and precision matter as much in relationships as in woodworking. We don't pretend the fractures never happened. We simply build around them with greater care. Perhaps the most surprising discovery has been that boundaries, properly maintained, don't just protect us from harm. They define the spaces where genuine connection can safely grow. Like a well-crafted joint, the strongest bonds allow each piece to maintain its integrity while supporting something larger than itself. As I begin each new project in my workshop, I'm reminded that the most honest creations acknowledge both perfection and flaw, strength and vulnerability. Some breaks can never be fully repaired, but with careful craftsmanship, they become part of a different, often stronger whole. This is the wisdom I've found in the aftermath of betrayal. Restoration isn't about erasing damage, but about building something truthful from what remains.